Welcome. I hope you're blessed in the Lord today. In this video, we want to ask the question, are we living in the last days? Now, spoiler alert, we most definitely are. The reason we know that is from the Bible, not from the situation around us, but we know from the Bible for sure that we're living in the last days, and so we'll get into that. Now, this is the first video I'm making since I got sick with dengue fever about 3 weeks ago. I was down sick for a week. I had to go to the hospital for about 4 days. And then had 2 weeks of recovery. So it's been 2 weeks I've just been kind of lolling around the house, and I wanted to get active, and so I have the energy to make some short videos. So this is going to be a short video, and we still have some long videos coming out that I made before I got sick, but I wanted to get active. And I want to thank all those that have been praying for me and praying for the family. We just are grateful for that, and I'm healed. So praise God. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. And we're going to look at the day of Pentecost, because when we ask the question, are we living in the last days, usually it's, because the European Union is doing this, or because of somebody who's supposed to be the Antichrist, or because they got microchip technology. But we want to ask the question, what does the Bible say about us living in the last days? Because all those things are kind of, outside of the Bible. But inside the Bible, it says this: Peter, on the day of Pentecost, stood up after the Spirit of God had come down. They spoke and began to speak the glories of God in languages they didn't know. People were listening to that from all around, and there was tongues of fire on their head. There was a sound of rushing wind, and he got up to explain what was happening. And so he said, "Men of Judea," this is Acts chapter 2, verse 14, the second half. "Men of Judea, and all you who dwell in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to my words. For these are not drunk, as you suppose, since it is the third hour of the day. But this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel." So now he's going to use a prophecy from the prophet Joel to explain what was happening at that time. Verse 17, "In the last days it shall be, says God, that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." And it goes on to explain. And it goes on, if we jump down to verse 21, "And whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." So when are people able to call on the name of the Lord and be saved? In the last days. That was the beginning of the last days at the day of Pentecost. So if we jump over to, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Paul says this, speaking about the sin that had happened in Israel, and that was an example for us, a warning for us. He goes on and said, verse 11. "Now all these things happened to them for examples. They are written as an admonition to us, upon whom the ends of the ages has come." So he was writing to the Corinthians and telling them that the end of the ages had come upon them, that they were living in the last days. If we jump over to 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. "Know this, in the last days perilous times will come. Men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, blasphemous, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, slanderers, unrestrained, fierce, despisers of those who are good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power." Now, so far this list, we look around, we read the news, or we watch the news, we hear what's going on around the world, and that seems to fit. And he started off by saying, "Know this, in the last days perilous time will come." So these are all descriptions of the last days. But then he goes on, the very last sentence he speaks in verse 5, "Turn away from such people." Because when Paul was writing this, he was talking about the days that they were living in. He wasn't talking about some future time that was going to happen, but it had already taken place. It was the last days. So let's pause here and ask the question, so what does the last days mean? Usually, when people think about the last days, they think about the very end of time when Christ returns, and they think a little bit before that is the very last moment of time before he comes again. But in the Bible, when it talks about the last time, or when the last days, it's not talking from the very end looking back, but it's talking about from the very beginning looking forward. In the Old Testament, it spoke about a time that would come, and many of the prophecies would be fulfilled in that time. It was looking ahead in the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, that is fulfilled. When Jesus Christ came, it became the last days. It's the last era of time before God wraps up all of history and judges the world. If we flip over to Hebrews chapter 1, God, who at various times and in diverse ways spoke long ago to the fathers through the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the world. These are the last days, the times of Jesus Christ, the age of the church, the time of Pentecost, and after that, the Spirit of God living and dwelling among men, the preaching of the gospel to the ends of the world, all the wickedness that we've seen for the last 2,000 years, wars and rumors of wars. These are the last days. We can look again if we go to 1 John. Let's see here. 1 John, verse 18, or chapter 2, verse 18. Little children, it is the last hour. So John says very clearly, it is the last hour. As you have heard that Antichrist will come, even now there are many Antichrists. By this we know it is the last hour. So John was saying, because of all the false teachers that were around at that time, because of all those antichrists, it was already evidence that they were living in the last hour, because that is what had been prophesied, that there would be false teachers, that there would be all kinds of deception. And so we need to recognize, if we're going to ask the question, are we living in the last days? We do not need to look at the newspaper. We simply need to go to the New Testament. Over and over again, it tells us we are living in the last days. From the time of Jesus Christ until the time he returns again is the last days of human history. Hope this has been helpful to you. God bless.